We're going to start the book of Bamidbar, this week's Parshas Matos, chapter 31, verse 25, Revi. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe le'moir so es roish malkoach hashvi bodom u'vabemo ato ve'elazar ha'kohen roshei avois ho'edo v'chotziso es hamalkoach ben toifsei hamilchamo hayotzim latzavo uvein kol ho'edo v'remoiso meches l'Adonai me'ez אנשי המלחמו היוצאים לצבא אחד נפש מחמש המאויס מן האדום ומן הבקר ומן החמורים ומן הצאן ממחציסם תיקחו ונוסעתו לאלעזר הכהן תרומס אדוני וממחציס בני ישראל תיקח 1% מן החמישים מן האדם, מן הבקר, מן החמורים ומן הצאן, מכל הבהמה, ונוסעת אויסם ללוויים, שאומרי משמרס משכן אדוני, ויעש משה ואלעזר הכהן, כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה, ויהי המלכוях יסר הבוז, אשר בוזזו עם הצבא, צאן 670,000 ו15,000 ובקר 72,000 וחמורים 60,000 ונפש אדם מן הנשים אשר לא ידעו משכב זכור כל נפש 32,000 ותהי המחצה חלק היוצאים בצבא מספר הצאן 330,000 ו17,500 ויהי המכס לאדוני מן הצאן 675 והבקר 36,000 ומחסום לאדוני 72 וחמורים 30,500 ומחסום לאדוני 60 ונפש אדם 16,000 ומחסום לאדוני 32 נפש ויתן משה אסמכס תרומס אדוני לאלעזר הכהן כאשר ציווה אדוני אס משה. So we fulfilled the obligation of doing Shnai Mikra Bechel Targum, which is the halach in Shulchan Aruch, mentioned in the Gemara. The person has to finish each week the parsha of the week twice. So what you could do, b'de'eved, is one time, if you say it together with the Chazan by Kriyas Torah on Shabbos, you fulfill one of the times. And the other time you do it, the way I do it, is to do it every day. So you do it according to the divisions, the 7 divisions. And then you're supposed to do one time Targum Unkelus, which is in Aramaic, but some Rishonim say that it's also important to do Rashi, and if you don't understand, you should do an English translation. One of the best translations is probably the Living Torah by Rabbi Kaplan. It's a very clear translation. He was a genius, and that's one of the. But Art Scrolls also good. Art Scrolls more translation according to Rashi. The Living Torah is not necessarily just according to Rashi. Art Scroll translation is according to Rashi. Those two are probably the best translations on the Chumash. And we're going to. There is also translations on according to Targum Unkelus. One was made on Sefer Bereshis by Emmanuel Feldman from Atlanta. He wrote, it's called the Ariel Chumash, and he does a translation in English according to the Targum Unkelus. There's also Chaplain.
Is the Ariel done? I've got by
just on Bereshis, but there is on the whole Torah by Rabbi Chaplain General Israel Drazen. He also did a more scholarly type of translation on the whole Chumash, according to Targum Unkelus. You can get it in some stores. Rabbi Israel Drazen, who's still alive. He was a general in the U.S. Army. His name was Israel Drazen. Yeah. So if you look in the Unkelus, we're up to chapter 31, verse 25. And Unkelus is very important because also, aside from that we're supposed to do it, like Shnai Mikra Bechel Targum, it would also help you know Aramaic, and then you could study Gemara and understand Gemara better, because the Gemara is written in Aramaic. Even there's some parts of Tanakh that are written in Aramaic, like Daniel.
Onkelos is Aramaic.
Onkelos is
It's
Aramaic.
good preparation for Gemara.
Yeah, and there's also parts of Tanakh, like the book of Daniel, and parts of the book of Daniel were written in Aramaic. So Aramaic is considered like a second holy language. It's not like Lashon Kodesh, but it's the language of the Gemara, so it's a very important language to know. And as I said before, even though there's so many translations into English of everything, of Gemara and Mishnayos and Chumash and Halacha, but the best way to do it is the way we do it here in the yeshiva, that anyone who doesn't know Hebrew goes to the Ulpan and learns Hebrew, and then he can learn from the original. In Aramaic also there's a book that was printed by Rav Ari Carmel, who used to be here in the yeshiva, called Aiding Talmud Study, which is a basic dictionary for Aramaic, which is also a very important booklet, which everyone should really know that booklet, because it's the basic words in the Gemara. You probably learned by him, Rav Ari Carmel. What's your first name? Uriah. Uriah, Avishai, and
Doron.
Doron. Okay. Doron means a gift,
And so
and
does
Avishai
Shai.
means the father of gifts, and Uriah means the light of Hashem. Orika, the light of Hashem. Okay, Onkelos. You all know about the pasuk you're supposed to say after davening, right? Of your name.
No.
At the end of davening, you're supposed to say a pasuk that starts with the first letter and the last letter of your name.
So how do you find that pasuk?
In the Art Scroll Siddur, they have it. If you want, after the class, I'll show you. You'll come up to me. I'll show you which pasuk is your pasuk. Okay?
Your first name, obviously.
No, if you have two names, if you have two Hebrew names, then you should do two pasukim. Both names. And that way you won't forget your name in the future. You always remember your name. Yeah, it says that.
Well, you won't forget the pasukim.
No, you're supposed to, when will be the day of judgment, after a person passes away, and there's the day of judgment, the person forgets everything, and even his name, because from so much fear. But if he says this pasuk, then that's a segula that he wouldn't forget his name. Okay. Onkelos. Va'amar Hashem leMoshe leMeimar, and Hashem said to Moshe, saying, Kabel yat chushban davras shivyo be'enosho ve'be'iro at ve'elozor kahana v'reishi avos knishto, except the numbers, the counting of the heads of the people that you captured, right? Be'enosho, with the people, or be'be'iro, and the animals. So some people, the men they killed, but they left the women and the children. So there was a lot of women and children who were captured. So they should take the accounting at you, ve'elozor kahana, and Elozor, who was the high priest, bereishi avos knishto, and the heads of the tribe, the heads of the congregation. Okay, so make a accounting how much there is. This is after the war with Midian, right? Tefaleg yos devarto, and divide the booty that you captured, bein gavre megiche krova de nefoko lechelo, between the people that went out to war, or bein kol knishto, and between the whole congregation. So here we see an interesting thing, that they call it, there's the combat soldiers, but there's also the people that stay back, who are supporting the soldiers, whether it's through davening, whether it's through supplying them with food. So they're supposed to get also from everything that the soldiers captured, because they were supporting the soldiers, they should also get some of it. So that's what the Torah is telling you here. And that's what happened also with David HaMelech. There were people that complained, we went to fight, and then there's people who just sat back. So David said, no, they guarded the people in the rear, they were praying, they're saying Tehillim, they should also get from the stuff that we captured. And that's what the Torah is saying over here, right? V'tafresh nesibo kodam Hashem, and you should also separate a tax to Hashem. Min gavre megiche krova, from the people who went out to war, the nefoko lechelo. Chad nafsho michamesh mea, 1 out of 500. So one person out of 500 should go to Hashem. We'll see soon what that means. Min anosha, from the people, and min Torah, and from the oxen, the cattle, min chamore, from the donkeys, or min ono, and from the sheep. So how do you do this to give it to Hashem? It says now, Mipalguso in Tisban, take half of it, V'titein leLozor kahana, give it to Aaron, to Elazar, the priest, Afreshusa kodem Hashem, to be separated to Hashem, which means it goes to the priest, it goes to the Kohen, and that's like giving it to Hashem, because they're the representatives of the Mishkan, they take care of the Mishkan. So I guess they would use the people that they got, they would use their servants, and the cows and the sheep, they could even use the sacrifices, the donkeys they would use to carry things, right? Umipalgos b'nei Yisrael, and then from half of the Jewish people, Tisab Chad, Ditachas min Chamshin, 1% of 50, 1/50th, which means 2%, right? 2%, 1/50th. 1/50th, min enosha from the people, min Torah from the oxen, min chamorah from the donkeys, min ono from the sheep, mikol be'ira from all the animals, v'titein yasoin, so maybe there were other animals too, apart from the sheep. There was mostly donkeys, sheep, and oxen, but there were other, might have been goats, or, well, goats are included in ono also. Maybe there were other animals, I don't know, camels. V'titein yasoin le'levoi, and those you should give to the Levites, Natre matras mashken od Hashem, who are guarding the tabernacle of Hashem. So again, so the Kohen gets 1 out of 500, and the Levim they get, because there were more Levim than Kohanim, right? So the Levim get 2%. 1 out of 500 is 1/5%, right? 1/5 of 1%. V'avad Moshe ve'Elazar kahana commanded paked Hashem yas Moshe. So Moshe and Elazar did like Hashem's commanded. V'hava devarto, and the amount of the loot that they captured, shar bizot, the bezu amo that they captured, the nefako l'cheila that went out to war. Ono there was shismer v'shivin v'chamsha v'alvin, 675,000 sheep. 675,000 sheep. That's how much sheep they captured. The Torah oxen, Shavin Utrein Alfil, 72,000. The Chamore, donkeys, Shitin, V'chad, Alfin, 61,000. You know, in Australia there's more sheep than people. Did you know that?
Than people in the world.
I don't know if people in the world than people in Australia. I don't think the people in the world. I don't know the amount, but I remember reading that in Australia there's more sheep than people. So here they had 675,000 sheep. Oxen, 72,000. Donkeys, 61,000. V'nafsho de'anosho, on people. Min neshaya from the women. They lo yidol mishkovei dechura, they didn't have relations. So they would check all the women that had relations, which means that they might have caused the Jewish people to sin, they were killed. But the women who did not have relations, who were virgins, they were kept alive. How did they know it? They would bring them in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and a woman who had relations, her face would turn green. If she was a virgin, then her face would not turn green. That's how they knew which woman was a virgin. So all these women, there was called nafshosot losin utrein alfin. There was 32,000. So I don't know what they did with these women. Probably, maybe they converted, became Jewish. I don't know. Could be. Or maybe they became maids, maidservants. Which also eventually, if they released, it's also a maidservant, a non-Jewish maidservant who's owned by a Jew. She's half a convert. There is such a thing as half a convert, which means she has to she has to keep all the mitzvahs. The men, let's say men, slaves, Canaanite slaves, non-Jewish slaves, have to keep mitzvahs like a woman. They not obligated in all the mitzvahs. They're only obligated in part of the mitzvahs. But as soon as they're released from bondage, if he releases them, how do you release a slave? By taking out his eye or tooth, right?
Or his ear.
His ear, right. But in the Chumash it says eye and a tooth.
Isn't it to the door?
If he hit him in the tooth, and he took out his tooth, then he becomes free. But then he has to keep all the mitzvahs. He's considered like a regular Jewish person, like a convert, full convert. Now, what happens if his dentist and he had a toothache and his master pulled out his tooth? Does he become free? What do you think? Does anyone know the answer to that? The Gemara says it's an argument between rabbis whether he goes free or not, and I think the halacha is that he doesn't, because it's not he. If he took out his tooth because he was punishing him, so then he goes free. But if he did it because he was healing him, so then he doesn't. Okay, we're up to chapter 31, verse 36 in the Targum. Do you have a chumash? Yeah, you can look at now. So it was 32,000 women who were virgins. The Havas Palgusa, so half of the Chulak Govrai, the Nofkul Echela, so half of it went to the soldiers, right? The 12,000 soldiers who went out to war. So Minyan Ono, the amount of sheep. Klas Meo, Otlosin, Ushva, Alfin, V'chameshmo. How many sheep were there altogether? It says before 72,000. So half of that is 337,500. That's half of the 675,000. It's interesting because how many Jewish people were there at that time? There was also about 600,000 adults, right? And there was sheep, even more than that. V'havas nesiva kodam Hashem, and the tax that was given to Hashem, that was given to the Kohen, to Elazar HaKohen and to the Levites, min ono from the sheep, shismo 600 shavin v'chomesh, 675. V'soirei, and from the oxen, tlosin v'shito alfin, 36,000, which is half of 72,000. Who's good at math here?
52,000. What do you want to know? What's the question?
What's half? Well, the Torah says how much it was. Torah tells you everything. You don't even have to calculate here. V'chamore, and donkeys, tlosin alofin v'chamesh meo. What? 30,500. And the Seben Kodam Hashem, and the part that went to Hashem, Shitin V'chot, 61. V'nafsho de Enosho, and the people, this the women, right, the virgins, there was 32,000. So half of 32,000 is 16,000. Shito Asar Alfin, 16,000. And the Seben Kodam Hashem, and the tax that went to Hashem was only 32. Because there's 1 out of 500, so that's 32 people. So 32 people went to the Kohen, went to Elazar HaKohen. We have Moshe, Yas Nesiva for Shusa Kodam Hashem, and Moshe gave that portion. So it's almost the same Hebrew, the same Aramaic word as in English. Afra Shusa is almost like portion, right? The portion Kodam Hashem, LeElazar Kahano, Kemo di Pakeid Hashem, Yas Moshe. Just like Hashem commanded Moshe. What's your Hebrew name?
Yehuda.
Yehuda. And what's your name? What's your name? Yes. David. And you? Malachi. Oh, good name. Malachi, according to the Targum, was Ezra. Malachi was the last prophet. And the Targum says it was Ezra. And what's your Hebrew name?
That's why he locked Ezra.
What's your Hebrew name?
Uri.
Hebrew. Uriah, right. Okay.
He's one of good friend is Ezra. Now I know why.
So according to my schedule here, to finish, so we finished the portion of the Torah for today. Does everyone have a Tanakh? Everyone here have a Tanakh, because now we don't do the prophets. So this is very important to know this, that the Tanakh is the first letters for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Torah has how many books? 5. Novi has how many books? How many books in the Novi?
12.
No. 8. There's 8 books in the Novi. How many books in...
The 12 prophets.
The 12 minor prophets is one book.
Oh,
It's one book. Counted as one book. There's 8 books. Yoshua. So who wrote the Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah. Except for right at the end where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu died, that was written by Yoshua. Yoshua wrote the book of Yoshua. Shoftim, the book of Judges. Who wrote the book of Judges? Very good, Shmuel Hanavi. Then you have, really, today they say Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Beis. That's a Christian thing. In the Torah, Shmuel is one book. It's not two books. The whole of Shmuel is one book. Then you have, who wrote the book of Shmuel?
God and Nathan.
Oh, so the first half, till where it says that Shmuel died, was written by Shmuel. From where Shmuel died, it was written by Gad and Natan, the two prophets who at the time of King David. They wrote the book of Shmuel. The book of Shmuel is basically, it starts off with Shmuel Hanavi, but it's about the story of King David. And then the book of Kings, Melachim, is also one book that talks about from the time of David HaMelech's death until the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. That was written by who? The book of Kings. Who wrote the book of Kings? Melachim.
Was one person?
Yes. David, you know who wrote it? Who wrote the book of Kings?
David, I'm sure you know.
I'll give you a hint. It's the same person that wrote the book of Eicha. Who wrote the book of Eicha? Who? Yirmiyahu. And the Shlach Kodesh says that Yirmiyahu and Shlomo HaMelech were the same. They were the same Gilgal. They were the same soul. So Shlomo HaMelech was the one who built the Beit HaMikdash, and Yirmiyahu was the one who saw it being destroyed. And he wrote the book of Kings, the book of Melachim, was written by Yirmiyahu. Okay, so we have Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Melachim. That's 4 books. The next 4 books are Yirmiyahu, which was written by who? Yirmiyahu, very good. Which speaks about the prophecy of destruction. It's the whole book is basically about the destruction of the temple and about some nations being destroyed. So that's Yirmiyahu. The next book is after Yirmiyahu. Which book is it? Yechezkel. Very good. Yechezkel. Half of Yechezkel speaks about destruction, so it's connected to Yirmiyahu. The second half of Yechezkel is about the building of the third temple and how the nations will be punished. So the first half of Yechezkel is destruction, but the second half is consolation. The next book is Yeshaya. Yeshaya is all about consolation. The Mashiach coming in the whole book of Yeshaya, consolation. So today, for some reason, in every Tanakh, they changed it around. But the Gemara, according to the Gemara and according to the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, that's supposed to be the order. The order is, they did it chronologically, but the order is supposed to be, first is Yirmiyahu, because right after Melachim, speaks about the destruction of the temple, then Yechezkel, which is half destruction, half consolation, and then Yeshaya, which is all consolation. Who wrote Yechezkel?
Himself, apparently.
Who?
He himself.
No.
No?
It was a group of people called the Men of the Great Assembly. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. It was led by Ezra. It was 120 rabbis, members of the Sanhedrin. Some of them were prophets, like Chagas Chari Malachi were prophets, who were members of the Men of the Great Assembly, and they wrote the book of Yechezkel. Who wrote the book of Yeshaya? It was also written by a group headed by one of the kings. Which king? A very important king of Yehuda, who even could have been Mashiach. Who was that?
Oh, it's Hizkiah.
Chizkiyahu, in the time of Chizkiyahu, was such a great king. He put a sword in front of every yeshiva, in front of every shul. He said, whoever doesn't go and study Torah will be killed. Right? He didn't just have an alarm system to make everyone go to Shir. He had a sword. Right? And he made everyone study Torah. The whole of Israel was studying Torah. That was Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Have any of you been through the tunnel of Chizkiyahu?
Yeah.
You've been through that tunnel?
A long time ago.
He diverted the king of Ashur, the king of northern Iraq. Sancherib came to Yerushalayim to make a war. He came with 1 million soldiers to make a war in Yerushalayim. And it was the night of Pesach, and Chizkiyahu just stayed in his palace and sang to Hashem. Didn't even sing to Hashem, he went to sleep. And the Hashem came with the angel and they killed all the soldiers. 1 million soldiers in one night. Right? So that was Chizkiyahu, such a righteous person. And he could have been Mashiach. That's what the Gemara says, but he wasn't. So Chizkiyahu, he wrote the book of Yeshaya. Yeshaya was his Father-in-law, very good. You're Talmid Chacham, this guy, Malachi. Very good. And then you have the Trei Asor, the 12 minor books. Does anyone know the 12 books up by heart? 12 minor prophets. They weren't minor, they were very big prophets. The reason why we call them minor prophets because the writings are small. It's small books. So they put them all together. Chachamim put them all together. That was also written by the men of the Great Assembly, by the Anshe Knesset Agdolah. And the 12 books are Hosea, the first one, Hosea,
Amos,
Yoel,
Yoel,
Amos, Ovadia, Yonah everyone knows, right, with the fish. If you read Moby Dick, right?
Avadia. Nee, we said Avadia. Yonah, we said.
Micha, Nahum, Habakkuk, Tzfanya, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. Those are the 12. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi were the last prophets. They lived in the beginning of the Second Temple period. Malachi is really the Ezra. Malachi was Ezra, was the last prophet. So now we're going to go. Now, also quickly, I want to say, okay, how many books is then Ketuvim? So you have 5 in Torah.
16.
8 in, no, 5 and 8 is 13. So how many do you have left over?
12. 11.
11, right? So it's 5, 8, 11. If you want to remember that, you just add on 3. So it starts off with 5, then you add on 3, it's 8. You add on another 3, it's 11. Together it's 24. 24 books of Tanakh. What are the 11 books of Ketuvim, of the writings? Let's quickly go through them. Tehillim. Well, the first one is really Ruth. Rus is the first one. Rus was written by who? Who wrote the book of Rus?
Prophet Shmuel.
What? Very good. Prophet Shmuel wrote it. Why did you write it? What was the purpose of it?
It was an ancestor of King David.
Yeah, and what was the purpose? To show the yichus of King David, because people were saying, that it's descended from the Moabite, so they showed that the book of Ruth was written to show that it was from Hashem, and the whole story of Ruth. So and also to show the great kindness of Ruth and Boaz, how she went with her mother-in-law, she left her nation, even though she was a princess, she went with her mother-in-law back to Eretz Yisrael. So Ruth is a very special book. So it's small, but it's written by Shmuel HaNavi. Then you have Tehillim that was put together by David HaMelech, but there's 10 authors of Tehillim. It's really, mostly it's King and David HaMelech, but there's other people that wrote it too. The sons of Korach, Asaph, Yedushan, Avram Avinu, Adam Arishan. There's different authors. Don't remember all 10. But anyway, Tehillim. Then you have Mishlei. Who wrote Mishlei? So Mishlei, it was authored by David HaMelech, by Shlomo HaMelech, but if you look in the book of Mishlei, chapter 25, verse 1, it says it was copied down by Chizkiyahu HaMelech. So really it was Chizkiyahu HaMelech that put it together. It was from Shlomo, but it wasn't Shlomo that edited it. It was Chizkiyahu and his group, his people. Then you have Tehillim, Mishlei, Eov. Who wrote the book of Eov, the book of Job? Who wrote that? Very good. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. The book of Job. What?
Where he lived several thousand years after Moses. He lived about 1,000 years after Moses.
Well, that's a question when he lived.
So how could you write it?
First of all, that's not a question because Moshe Rabbeinu was a Navi, he was a prophet. He knew the whole of history. He knew what would happen. But it's not so simple that he lived after Moshe. There's some say that he did. It's an argument when Eov lived. Some say there was never. It was just a parable. It never really happened. And some say that really Eov is the story of every person. Because every person goes through suffering, so it's really every person. It's like a parable. There's an argument in the Gemara. Some say he lived in the time of Paro, right? The time of Moshe Rabbeinu. That when the spies went into Israel, that's the day that he died. So some say he did live in the time of Moshe. So it's a question when he was, but they're all right because these things aren't really arguments. So in a certain sense, there was a lot of people in different generations that had the same type of life as Eov. And also it's a parable because it's not exactly the way. So it's a parable for every person. But anyway, that's a talk by itself. So you have Eov that was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Then, so Tehillim, Eov, Mishlei, what else? Shir HaShirim was written also by Shlomo HaMelech. Kohelet, right? How do you say it in English? I never can get it straight. Ecclesiastes. It's really Greek, right? Ecclesiastes. I never get it straight, but okay. Ecclesiastes, okay. So, and I can never spell it. Did any of you spell Ecclesiastes?
I'm Greek.
You could spell it? Ah, you're Greek, so you could. In Greek you could, right?
You can spell it in English.
According to Reb Gamliel, you're allowed to read Megillas Esther in Greek. You're allowed to write it in Greek.
What does it mean, Ecclesiastes?
Wisdom, right? Means wisdom.
Ecclesiastes means
Parables, wisdom. Gathering together. Gathering. Kohelet, Lashon Keilah. Gathering together. Kohelet, then you have what else?
Esther.
Esther, okay. Who wrote Esther?
Esther Mordechai.
It says right then, the Miguel says, it says, Vatichtov Esther Amalka, Mordechai Yehudi. They wrote it, yeah? What else?
Daniel.
Daniel. Who wrote Daniel?
Good question. Daniel.
Anshe Knesset Agdolah wrote Daniel. Ezra was written by Ezra. Nehemiah?
Nehemiah?
Yeah, Nehemiah
He
finished.
wrote his own book?
Yes.
Oh.
Ezra and Nehemiah is really one book. According to the Talmud, Ezra and Nehemiah is not two books. It's one book. Because if you count, there's 24. If you count Nehemiah by itself, then it comes out there's 25 books. So Ezra and Nehemiah is really one book. And then you have what else?
Divrei
Divrei Yamim.
Hayom.
Was written by who?
Ezra.
Also by Ezra. So we said everybody? Said all the books? We did? We went through all the books? Okay.
So the Christians, because they don't have Gemara, they know this much better. They know the Tanakh much better.
We're supposed to know Tanakh too. Every person has to know Tanakh. That's why I made this kind of thing that you finish every year Tanakh. Okay.
So Gemara should come off in.
No, we should
reality.
divide up your time. Make some time for Tanakh, a little bit. Okay, of course, Chamesh and then Navi and Ketuvim. Now, I want to say just a few words about the difference. What's the difference? You see, there's three separations. There's Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Why are they separated into three? I mean, here you see, let's say, yeah?
Because of the book, the Torah was given to Moses. Who
Okay, Eov was also written by Moses.
But that's only. You said yourself that there's an argument when he was.
No, but Moses wrote it. Doesn't matter when Eov was. Moses was the one who wrote Eov.
It could be that it has a difference in the teaching, I guess. Because the Torah is a certain teaching, it's the law.
The
The
Torah is more important.
of Hashem. Then the book of the prophet speaks about the time of Yeshua, the time of entering Israel, the time of being exiled by Israel.
There's no mitzvot in the prophets, you say? There is some mitzvot written in the prophets.
Building of the
Is
temple.
it because once was the time of the Beit HaMikdash? No?
No. Okay, I'll tell you the difference. We say every day if you say Yigdal, or you say 13 Principles of Faith, Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest prophet of all the prophets. What does it mean when we say Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest prophet? It means two things. The Rambam explains that Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest prophet because the way Hashem spoke to him was like the Chumash says, he would speak to him straight. All the other prophets, it was through an angel. Hashem didn't speak straight to the prophet. That's one difference. Second difference is that all the prophets, it was in a dream, as Moshe Rabbeinu was awake when Hashem spoke to him. Another difference is that when Hashem spoke to all the prophets, they would become, not just they were asleep in a dream, but they couldn't even move. They would become completely incapacitated, like they're in a coma. And but Moshe Rabbeinu, nothing would happen to him. It was just like a person speaking to another person. And the fourth difference between Moshe and all the other prophets, all the other prophets, it was only when Hashem wanted. But Moshe, whenever Moshe wanted, he could ask Hashem something, Hashem would answer it. Because it was at such a high level. He was so close to Hashem, and that's why he was the biggest prophet. Now, the difference between the Torah and all the other prophets, so that's the difference in the personality of Moshe. But there's also a difference in the way the Torah was written. The way the Torah was written was Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem told him word for word what to write down. Word for word, exactly. He had a clear vision. It's called Aspeklaria Hameira, a clear vision. Hashem told him exactly what to write. So that's called Torah. Torah, it was word for word from Hashem. So even though we call it the Torah of Moshe, it was really Hashem telling Moshe exactly what to write. Shechina medaber mitoch grono, the Shechina was talking through from his throat. But also when he wrote down, it was word for word. The other prophets, when they wrote the prophecy, they wrote the books of the prophecy, they had some kind of vision when they were asleep, when they were dreaming, and they had to put that vision that they had into words. So they they had to use their own sense of the way they wrote. Of course, it's true 100%. The whole of Torah is true. Everything is true. But it's just a different level. The Torah is a higher level than the other prophets because it was written with a clear vision. Aspeklaria hameira, with a vision of light, a clear vision. That means, aspeklaria, it's a question what it means exactly, whether it means a mirror or whether it means a glass, a clear glass. So, but really it's both things, because a mirror is, you look at a mirror and you see your own, you see yourself. Aspeklaria. You see yourself. You look through a glass, you see everything on the outside. So it's a question whether, so it was also from himself, from his own neshama, but it was also something from the outside. So it was both things together. But with Moshe Rabbeinu it was clear, it was with the me'ira, it was lit. With the other prophets, aspeklaria she'ena me'ira, wasn't clear. This is from the Midrash. The Midrash says. Now, so the books of the prophets was written with prophecy, or that they wrote it down. The books of Ketuvim, the writings, the 11 books, were not written with prophecy. They were written with something called Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, which is a lower level than prophecy. It's not something that Hashem was talking to them through an angel, but it was some kind of divine inspiration that they had. So when David HaMelech wrote Tehillim, it's not that Hashem told him, it wasn't a prophecy. He had some kind of inspiration from Hashem. He would play music, he would get inspiration, and he would write down the Tehillim. Even Eov, the book of Job, that was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, was not written with prophecy. It's a lower level than the book of the prophets, even though it was written by Moshe, because it was not written with prophecy. It was Moshe Rabbeinu had some kind of divine inspiration, and he wrote down that book. So it's a lower level.
What about the Tehillim that speaks about the Jews crying by the rivers of Babylon? I mean, this is going to happen like 100 years later.
Yeah. Well, David HaMelech was a prophet, but when he wrote down those words, it wasn't a prophecy to write down those words. It was an inspiration that he had. He knew it was going to happen, and he had an inspiration. He wrote down the words, but it was not written with in prophecy. It's not part of Nevi'im. So you even have some verses. You have verses in Tehillim that are almost the same, like verses in Shemuel. Let's say there's a song written by David HaMelech at the end of the book of Shemuel, and it's also written in Tehillim. But there's a few minor differences. And these minor differences have to do with this point, that whether it was written with prophecy or was written just with divine inspiration. So that's a lower level. Okay? So now we're going to go, does everyone have a Tanakh? We're going to learn the chapter of Tanakh for today, which is the book of Yeshaya, chapter 6. The book of Yeshaya, if you don't have a Tanakh, I have one here. Book of Yeshaya, chapter 6. What's your Hebrew name? Shlomo. This is Shlomo. He's a chaplain in the U.S. Army. He can make you all do push-ups. So chapter 6 in Yeshaya. So again, who wrote the book of Yeshaya? Chizkiah, his son-in-law, right? He wrote it. Yeshaya himself did not write it. He was killed when in the middle of his life, he was killed by his grandson. Menashe killed him. Menashe was a very bad person, and he killed Yeshaya. So
was this written while Yeshaya was alive or not?
No. It was written after he died. Maybe it was written when he was alive, because it was written by Chizkiah.
Yeah, where does it come from, all these prophecies and all this?
Maybe he told Chizkiah. I don't know. That's a good question. To look into that. If it was written maybe it was written when he was alive, but I don't know. Maybe it's something that he taught Chizkiah, and then they wrote it down later.
Because this is really deep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we're up to Yeshaya chapter 6. Okay? Really, Rashi says that this is really the beginning of the book of Yeshaya. This is the beginning. He says the 5 chapters before this, chapter 6, were said after this. And he says, En mukdamu mu'char b'Torah. It brings a proof for that. Okay, so let's read here. Follow along with me. If you can read together with me, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to read with the trop, right? So we said last time it's very important to know trop, because it's not just the way of singing the Haftorah for Bar Mitzvah boy. There's so much you can learn just from the timing, from the trop. And everyone, when you learn, you're supposed to use it. Okay? So you just follow along with me. You have the place, everybody?
Yeah.
Uriah, you have the place? Uriah. Ken? Bishnas Mois Hamelech Uziyo Vore Es Adonai Yoshev Al Kisei Rom Veniso Veshulov Meleim Es HaHeichol Srofim Moimdim Mimaloi Sheish Knofayim Lechod Bishtayim Yechasef Anov Ubishtayim Yechaser Aglob Ubishtayim Yeoifeif. Come on, you can say it with me. I want to hear some sound here. V'korozel ze v'omar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzavois Meloi Chol Haaretz Kvoidoi V'yonu Amois Asipim Mikoil HaKoirei V'habayis Yimolei Oshon V'oimar Oili Kidid Meisi Kish Tmeis Vosayim Onoichi Uvesoich Am Tmeis Vosayim Onoichi Yoshev Ki Es HaMelech Adonai Tzvois Roeinoi Vayof Elai Echod Min Hasrofim Uveyodoi Ritzpo B'melko Chaim Lokach Me'al HaMizbeach Vayaga Al Pi Vayomer Hinei Noga Ze Al Sfosecho V'sor Avinecho V'chatoscho Techupor V'eshma Es Koil Adonai Oimer Es Mi Eshlach Umi Yelech Lonu Voimar Hineni Shlocheini Vayomer Lech Ve'omarto Lo Mazeh Shimush Omoya V'al Tovinu Ruroi V'al Teidou Hashmein Levo Mazeh Voznov Hachbein Veinov Hosha Penire Veinov Voznov Yishmo Levavo Yavin V'shov V'rofoloi Voimar Ad Mosai Adonai Vayomer Ad Asher Im Shaurim Mein Yoshev Uvotim Mein Odom Vadomo Tishoesh Momo Verichak Adonai Sodom Verabo Azuvo Bekerev Oretz Voidbo Asirio V'shavo Voiso Levoer Keilo V'chaloin Asher B'shaleches Matzeves Bom Zera Kodesh Matzavto. So one thing that's important to know about the trop is, you know, when you finish a verse, there's like a period, right? Sof pasuk it's called. But there's a second period in every pasuk that's more than 5 words, has a second period, which is called esnachta. And there's only one in every verse. It has more than 5 words, there's one esnachta, and that's also like a semi-period. Every asnachta is really the middle of the verse. It's important to know that, because that way you understand the way the verse works.
What other significant sense the chop got?
The trop is from Sinai. It's from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's very important to understand the trop.
When you stay on one word for a long time, whoa.
Yeah, there's a significance to
But
it.
it's different.
Yemenis use
Sephardi say it different.
There's a
Yemenite
logic.
say
It doesn't
different.
matter. But
Moroccans say it
it's all the
different.
everyone has the same trop.
Right.
It's just a different way of
It's just a
singing
different
it.
way of singing it, yeah.
And there's a logic to it. It's very hard to explain. There's a logic to the trop. It's not just random. There's a whole logic to it. Very.
It's supposed to be a song, right?
Well, a part of it is supposed to be a way of singing it, and there's different customs to way to sing it. But the main thing is not the way, but the sing it. The main thing is because that way you understand the way the verse is built through the trop. And there's whole books on it. One of the best books is it's in Hebrew by Rabbi Mordechai Breuer wrote a book about how to understand the. I also don't completely understand it. I've tried to understand and read it a few times. It's very, very hard to understand, but there is a logical system to the trop. People don't know that. Even people that know how to lane, it's more from memorization. It's not so much that they know how the logic behind it. But there is a logic behind it. Little bit. There is a logic behind it. Okay. Now the other,
Just one question.
Yes.
Why is Yud K Vav K not used here?
in that Tanakh, doesn't write
in-
Yud K Vav.
We don't have Yud K Vav K here.
Some Tanakhs don't have it because the holy name of Hashem's that I want
Yeah,
to
but
print.
why would some
Which verse?
all of them? We
Not
have
the
others
first
that we
In
have
verse
others
Hey,
that
it doesn't
do
say
the
Yud K Vav K.
The first one.
In Jerusalem Bible.
Well, that,
Jerusalem Bible, yeah.
in the first verse, that's the way it's written. It's not written Yud K Vav K.
Yeah, but throughout the whole chapter.
In verse Hey, it doesn't say Yud K Vav K. Look in
So
chapter.
instead of Yud Kei
It's
Vav
not,
Kei,
in
what
verse
is it?
Hey. It does say, I think, in there Yud K Vav K. Pasuk Hey.
Ah.
Right? It says Yud K Vav K in there. I think it does. Okay. Now another thing. So we're learning now we learned the chap. We just read it. Now to understand a parak in Nevi'im, especially in Nevi'im, you're supposed to learn it with Targum. Targum Yonatan ben Uziel, like we mentioned before, he was the greatest Talmud of Hillel. All those that are single, they say if you go to his grave in Amukah, then you'll find it'll be
He
easy
was
for you to
single
find
himself.
your
He-
zivug.
He was single himself.
He was, maybe, I
I
don't know.
think he never found a wife.
Didn't?
What's that the other day?
He never
Who
got
said
married.
that?
Which verse?
How do you
I
know?
think he never got married.
Yeah.
Which verse is going there?
That's how the story
It's
goes.
too holy, baby.
He never got married.
When he would learn Torah, the birds that were flying above him would burn. So maybe women were too afraid of him, such a holy person, I don't know. So anyway, maybe it was like Ben Azai. If he didn't get married, it was probably because he was so into learning that he...
Right, yeah, that's why.
That's probably the reason. But he was the greatest Talmud. Hill had 80 students. The greatest one was Yonis ben Uzziel. He wrote the translation to Nevi'im, to all the books of Nevi'im. There's a translation written on Targum Yonis ben Uzziel. And I don't understand why there's even a lot of people, they publish Nevi'im, they publish books of Nevi'im with Mefarshim, with Rashi, Metzudas and other, and they don't put the Targum in there. The Targum is the first, you're supposed to learn Targum first before anything else. Because without that you're not going to understand it. The Gemara in Megillah, we just learned in the Daf Yomi, that he was even going to write a translation to Ketuvim, but he didn't write it because in Daniel it says when Mashiach is going to come. So he couldn't do it because he would have to write the meaning of that, and then we would know when Mashiach is coming. So he couldn't. That's why he didn't do he didn't do a translation of the whole of Ketuvim because of that reason. That's what the Gemara says. So let's read the Targum. We'll explain it. Perek Vav Pasuk Aleph, okay? Beshato, in the year, Disnada Bo Malka Uzziel, that the king Uzziel got leprosy. He didn't die, even though if you read the Hebrew, it says when he died, but this doesn't mean that he died. He got leprosy, because when someone gets leprosy, it's like they're dead. Why is it like they're dead? I don't know if... leprosy is not what they call today leprosy. It's some kind of skin discoloration.
Talk about Shara.
Like a white, you get a white discoloration.
Shara.
Maybe
Torah.
because of Lashon Hara.
Shara.
Because what happens if someone has tzaras, then he has to separate himself from people. He goes away from society, right? He has to go out of the city, live by himself until he does teshuvah, and it goes away. So that's why if someone is living without society, is living all by himself, it's in some sense it's like he's dead. So that's why it's considered metzorah chashuv kemet. And you see it from this pasuk, right? B'shato ditnado b'malko Uzziel. In the year that Uzziel the king, Uzziel was one of the kings. Why did he get this discoloration, sarat? Does anyone know?
Maybe Lashon
He
Hara.
went
No.
He lit burnt incense.
It's in the book of Chronicles, right? He did like Nadav and Avihu. He went into this. He wasn't a Kohen. He was from David HaMelech. He was a king, and he went into the Bet HaMikdash, and he wanted to get so close to Hashem, like Nadav and Avihu, and he brought the incense into the Bet HaMikdash, and when he came out, he had on his head, he had the tzara. So this is the year. This is when Yeshayahu started his prophecy. Like we said before, Rashi says this is when he started. This is the way the prophecy of Yeshayahu started. Amar Navo. So the prophet said, Chazeisi yasikora da Hashem. I saw the glory of Hashem. Shorei. So you're right. Here, this in the Chumash, it does not use in the Navi. It does not use the Yud Kei Vav Kei here. It uses Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. The name of Hashem, which is Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, which is the way we pronounce it, but it's not the name of Hashem itself. right? Share al Kurse, I saw the glory of Hashem sitting on a throne. Ramu misnatel b'shmei maroimo, high up in heaven. The miziv yikoreim, from the glory of Hashem, ismelei heichla. The chamber was filled with Hashem's glory. So Rashi says here, what this means, I saw Hashem sitting on the heaven, and his feet, this is all spiritual, yeah, was in the Beis Hamikdash to judge Uzziah, because he wanted to become the priest when he wasn't a priest, right? You can't just become a priest like that. Decide one day you want to be a priest. So, this is the vision that he had. Shamoshin Kadishim Barome Kadmoi. He saw Shamash. How do you say Shamash? Shamash is a...
God.
No, not guard. A server, servant.
Servant.
Not,
The shamash on the
Shamash.
name of the Chanukah.
yeah, what's a Shamash? How do you say in English? Caretaker. So the holy caretakers, Beruma Kadmoi, were sitting in front in the greatness for Hashem. Shito Gapin Lechad. They all had 6 wings. Shito Gapin Lechad. 6 wings. Betrain Mechase Apoy. 2 of them covered their face, the Loi Chose, they shouldn't see the glory of Hashem. Or betrain Mechase Gviose. 2 of them covered their body, the Loi Mischaze. The Loi Mischaze, so their body shouldn't be seen. So it covered their body, so the body shouldn't be seen. And betrain Meshamish with 2. So the 2 that was covered his body, Rashi gives 2 reasons. Rashi says the covered, well, in the Hebrew it says raglov, his feet. The Targum translates his body. The feet is the body. But Rashi gives one explanation, which seems to be the explanation of the Targum, because of sneers, so his body shouldn't be seen in front of Hashem. In Medrash Tanchuma it says that the feet of an angel look like the feet of a calf. So that's why there's wings on it, that Hashem should not remember the sin of the golden calf, which happened yesterday, right? The sin of the golden calf happened yesterday. That's why Aaron HaKohen said, Chag L'Hashem Machar. Tomorrow will be a festival to Hashem, because one day Shivasa B'Tammuz will be a Yom Tov. That's what the Shlosh says, right?
So the wings on the calf was to like atone or something for the...
Not to atone, but to cover, because they have the angels, their feet are like calves' feet. So that it shouldn't remind Hashem of the sin of it shouldn't remind the Jewish people the sin of the golden calf. That's why when we put our feet together, symbolize like the angels, the way they stand. Yeah.
Well, all this thing is like spiritual, right? Like,
yes, of course it's spiritual. Right.
It's like spiritual calf.
Yeah,
bodies,
for sure.
Like,
Yeah. You
Why
want to know what it means spiritually?
Why do we
He
eat
explains it. The
calves?
Malbim explains it. It's a little bit deep here. It's very long.
Calves is kosher, right?
Right.
So doesn't that remind us of the golden calf?
when was the last time you ate gold?
When was the last time I ate gold?
Yeah.
Okay. Next pasuk. This pasuk, we all know this pasuk, right? Umekablin deimin dein. They call out to each other, v'amrin, and they say, Kaddish b'shmei meroima. Holy is Hashem in the heavens. Ilo beis shchinte. In the glory of his dwelling place. Kaddish al ara oivad gvurte. Holy is Hashem on the land where he does his strength. Kaddish le'olam le'olmel nayo. Hashem is holy forever and ever. So the reason, the way the Targum, and we say this, right, in Novalet Zion Goel, we say this Targum. Why is the 3 times Kadosh according to the Targum? The first Kadosh symbolizes that Hashem is holy in heaven. The second is Hashem is holy in earth. And the third is Hashem is holy forever and ever. Right? That's how the Targum explains it. Now what does it mean that they call out to each other? Rashi says that they get permission from one another, that they should all, because if one of them starts before the other one, then he'll be burnt to death. They all have to say it together. They all have to daven together. That's why we say in Kedusha, Rashi says, we say Kedusha, Kulam Ke'echad. Well, how does Sephardim say it? Any Sephardim here?
Ahad.
No. They don't say Kedusha, they say Benima Kedosha. They stop there and then they say Kulam Ke'echad. Uriah, you holding with us?
He's Faradi. He should know.
So right, you're saying davening. The Rashi was Ashkenazi, so Rashi brings the Ashkenaz that goes
Ashkenazi?
together. Rashi was Ashkenazi. Yeah.
But he.
I'm sorry to say it, but he was.
But
Yeah.
Was he French or something?
He was French, French Ashkenazi.
Nowadays the French
He
are
was
smart.
probably Moroccan.
No,
Huh?
it's not true. Most French are Ashkenazi today.
I think most of them are Sephardim. I think come from Morocco. A lot of them came from Algeria and Morocco. I don't know. You want to do a survey? I don't know. Anyway, all the French are coming to Eretz Yisrael now because there's so much anti-Semitism there. They just had. You heard there was a big demonstration in front of the synagogue 2 days ago.
Yeah, in Paris.
Yeah, and they needed the police to. Okay, so Hashem Tzvakot. What does it mean, Hashem Tzvakot? It means Hashem. Tzvakot is one of the names of Hashem. What does it mean, Tzvakot?
Commander.
Tzavais comes from army because Hashem has battalions and battalions of all legions, right? Hashem Tzvakot, Malyo Kol Aro Zivikore. The whole earth is full of His glory. Now, I want to talk a few minutes about this verse. The whole world is full of Hashem's glory. What does that mean? The whole world is full of Hashem's glory. According to the Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidim, it means that Hashem is literally everywhere. Hashem is everywhere. Now, what does that really mean? We don't really understand, but it means that's how the Baal Shem Tov explains this pasuk. Hashem is everywhere. So Hashem is in this table? Yeah. Because if Hashem would take away His energy from this table, it would fall apart. It's all made of atoms and electrons, right? Hashem is giving energy every second to this table. So Hashem is everywhere. So maybe today scientifically you can understand this a little bit more. It means Hashem's energy, or that Hashem is the whole time, Hashem is everywhere. Like the Zohar, yeah.
Interesting, such as I read recently a book about by advanced nuclear physics, and it says that a electron, or I'm sorry, within the nucleus, the protons and neutrons, the particles there are spinning around 30 billion times a second. Wow. 30 billion.
What happens 30 billion times a second?
Goes around.
In other words,
Spins.
something has to move that. It's hard to believe, hard to even conceive.
Right.
I mean, every part of the reality of all the world universe, everything is in motion.
Right.
It's kind of,
Yeah. So according to the Baal Shem Tov, it means Hashem's energy, Melok Kol Haaretz Kvodo, that Hashem's glory fills the world. It means even according to the simple meaning that Hashem is everywhere. And the Baal HaTanya, who was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Maggid, he wrote a letter, and he writes in this letter that he brings this pasuk, Melok Kol Haaretz Kvodo, and he says it means that Hashem is everywhere. And he writes there that according to the Vilna Gaon, this is what he writes in the letter, according to the Vilna Gaon, it doesn't mean that Hashem is everywhere, it means that Hashem's providence, the Hashgacha of Hashem is everywhere. The providence of it doesn't mean that Hashem is everywhere. It means that Hashem's providence is everywhere.
What does that mean?
It means that Hashem has mashkiach. He sees everything. He knows everything that's going on, and he's in control of the whole world, of the whole universe. Not that Hashem literally is everywhere, but Hashem is in control of the universe. That means the whole earth is full of His glory. It means that Hashem is in control. That anything that happens in the world is from Hashem, right? We have to believe it. Everything is hashgacha pratid. Everything happens for a reason, right?
So we would say, according to that understanding, like the table is an inanimate object that doesn't contain Hashem.
Right.
Hashem could
Right,
will it
exactly.
not exist.
So then the Baal HaTanya writes that that's the reason why the Gra was against the Baal Shem Tov, and why the students of the Baal Shem Tov, the students of the Gra even burnt some of the Sfarim of the Baal Shem Tov's Talmidim, like Toldot Yaakov Yosef, which was one of the most important Sfarim of Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Polnoah, is because they were against, because the Gra taught them against this, but the Baal Shem Tov's teacher was one of the main teachings of Hasidus, that Hashem is everywhere, and they were against it, and that's why they were burning his Sfarim. And then the Baal Tanya says, if I tried, he says, he writes, I tried to go to visit the Vilna Gaon, and if I would have been able to go in and see him, because the Vilna Gaon didn't want to talk to him, didn't see him, but he said, if I would have been able to see him, I would have proved to him that I'm right, that the Hasidic way is right, and he would have listened to me. That's what it says in the letter. Okay, so then there's a sefer written called Torah Shlema, Reb Menachem Kasher. It was a very big, he was a Ger Chassid. He wrote, my father used to take me to see him many times. A very big Gaon, he knew the whole Torah inside out. He wrote this Torah Shlema. Some of it is even he translated to English. It's like all the Medrashim on every pasuk in the Torah. It's like 20 volumes or something. Huge. So he writes, he brings this letter of Baal Tanya, and then he says, who was one of the greatest students of the Vilna Gaon? Who was it? Does anyone know? Who was one of the greatest students? Chaim of Volozhin. The one who started the Volozhina Yeshiva, which was one of the biggest yeshivas in Europe, in Lithuania. He was a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, and one of his main books is called Nefesh HaChaim, which is a book about Kabbalah, basically. And so this Reb Menachem Kasher brings in this, he says, if you look through Nefesh HaChaim, and he brings the places, it seems like the Nefesh HaChaim agreed with the Baal Tanya, not with the Vilna Gaon. And he said, how could it be that even though he was a student of the Vilna Gaon, and he held so much of the Vilna Gaon, he writes such amazing things, how great he was, but nevertheless, with this he disagreed with him, and he held that Melokol Haaretz Kvodo means that Hashem is everywhere. Okay? And then he continues to write that really, this Reb Menachem Kasher says, that the Vilna Gaon was wrong, because he brings from the Zohar, one of the names of Hashem in the Zohar is Sovev Kol Almin, Umemale Kol Almin, or it says Ein Sof, right? That Hashem fulfills all the worlds. He's everywhere, right? Hashem is everywhere. He fills all the worlds. So you see that really the Hashem is everywhere. So the Vilna Gaon was wrong. That's what he writes. Anyway.
The Kotzker Rebbe said Hashem can be everywhere or Hashem can be nowhere. It depends
if you let him in.
If you let him in.
Oh, okay. But that's not as simple. Yeah, no, that's just the saying that a person should let Hashem in. So anyway, so that's what Rav Kasher writes. However, Rav Dessler, which Rav Carmel, who taught him in the yeshiva, put together the books of Rav Dessler, Michtam Eliyahu, Strive for Truth. The fifth book of Michtam Eliyahu, which was not translated to English yet. If you look over there, if you want to see it inside, I can show it to you. He says, Rav Dessler held that there was no argument between the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon. And really the Vilna Gaon, of course he agreed with the Baal Shem Tov because in the Zohar, and the Vilna Gaon knew the Zohar. And he knew that the Melokol Haaretz Kvodo means that Hashem is everywhere. It means not just that Hashem is providence everywhere, it means that Hashem is everywhere. However, the Vilna Gaon was against it only because he thought that people will not understand it, because it's a very, very deep thing. And people won't understand it, and he was against the way the Hasidic movement was teaching it. But he wasn't against it itself. He held just like the Baal Shem Tov. And the Rav Dessler, he held that there was no argument between the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon. Now, the Rav Dessler was a unique person, because you have rabbis in the world who are Hasidim, right? Then you have rabbis, the Litvish rabbis. You have the great Hasidic Rebbes, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzanzer Rebbe, Ger Rebbe. And then you have the Litvish rabbis. And usually there's no one who studies, who's connected to both. Not that many. But the Rav Dessler, he would study Hasidics for him, and he would teach it. And he was a descendant of Rebbe Yisroel Salanter. He was also very into Musar. So he would use both. My Rebbe was also like that. Reb Shlomo Wolbe was also taught here in the yeshiva. He also was like that. My father also was like that. And there's not many rabbis like that. They try and learn from everybody, whether it's, But today it's getting a little bit like that, because if you hear sometimes big Litvish rabbis, like even Rabbi Socha Fran or something, they would quote Reb Tzadok Milublin, who's a Hasidic rabbi, so they quote Litvish rabbis, Hasidic rabbis. So it is changing a little bit, but there is, I think in America, for example, one of the greatest yeshivot in America, Rabban Kotler, for example, he wasn't Hasidic. He didn't really study Hasidic books. But there was a rabbi who started Yeshiva Torah V'das, where I learned, called Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelovich. You heard of him? Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelovich. He studied Torah Masorah. He studied Torah V'das. He was a very great rabbi. He always called himself Mr. Mendelovich. When he first came to America, he came from Hungary. He had an ice cream store, and that was his job. And when he started the yeshiva Torah V'das, he said he doesn't really want to produce rabbis. He wants to produce misters who study Torah, who have professions and study Torah. And that was his goal, Mr. Mendelovich. But the Panovich Rav called him Nister Mendelovich, Nister, because it was very hidden. But he always taught his students, whom my Rebbe included, my Rebbe was called Rabbi Avram Pam, if you've heard of him. He was considered one of the greatest rabbis in America. And he also, in his Sefer, brings from Hasidic sources too. So there is some great rabbis who put them together. But, and that's the whole, that there wasn't really an argument between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim. It's just the way how you talk about it. But it wasn't in the thing itself, what Hashem is or how Hashem relates to the world. There wasn't really any argument between them. Okay?
The only rabbi I've heard, like, Rab Dessler type of teaching is your father. Most rabbis I've been attending to shurim, they're either Litvish, all the way Litvish, even if you're Sephardi rabbis, they're all Litvish. So now
Sephardi rabbis don't use so much Hasidic books.
Yeah.
But Rabbi Vadia used to. If you look in Rabbi Vadia Yosef's books, he brings a lot of times Hasidic stories.
A little bit.
Yeah, he doesn't bring so much Hasidic teachings, but he does bring Hasidic stories.
You meant to learn from everybody.
Right,
In Pekah
exactly.
Avot. So
No,
what
but
is the-
everyone has a different Rebbe, and so some Rebbes they just didn't study his Hasidic books so much.
No, my question is, if we meant to learn from everybody,
Yeah.
why are there some literatures that don't want to learn from the Hasidim? Is it because
I think
if
it's
you learn
changing.
from the Hasidim, then it's about a Zaira?
No one says it's Avodah
Then
Zarah.
what is it?
No one
is it
says
that I wanna
Avodah
learn from
Zarah.
Hasidim?
No one says Avodah Zarah.
Why, if I learn from Chabad stuff, right, and I'm learning stuff, and some people think he thinks, am I breaking something by learning Chabad stuff?
It depends what you're learning.
If
No one will tell you anything bad about the Balatanya.
okay,
Even
so
though
I can learn Tanya.
you can learn whatever you want.
That's
Whatever's good
right.
for your neshama, that's what you should learn. If you want to learn Breslev, that's good for your neshama, learn Breslev.
Okay.
I think like my
And why
father,
don't the
it
Litvish-
depends on each soul. Every neshama is different. So as long as you're learning Torah, it doesn't matter, So you're learning Torah, it doesn't matter who you learn from. But Rav Ari Karmel was also like that. He was also a student of Rav Dessler, and he also,
Right.
Rav Dessler brings
But
the
that
Tanya all the time.
But that was some years back.
He's not alive anymore. Karmel.
Nowadays it's all Litvish or Hasidic.
No, not necessarily. I'm saying in like Torah V'das they use both. Have you ever heard of Rabbi Yisrael Reisman? Have you heard of him?
Where is he from?
He's in Torah V'das
In New York?
in New York, and he has a shul. I go to Yisrael of Madison. He gives every Motzei Shabbat in the winter. He gives a Tanakh shir. He has over 1,000 people come to his shir. He gives it in a Sephardi shul, Nachiezer. Did you ever go there to Rav Reisman?
Listen,
Heard the tapes?
The tapes, yeah.
Heard the tapes?
1,000
So he
people-
uses Reb Tzadok, and he uses. You can get his
1,000 people-
tapes.
No, listen, 1,000 people against 1 million Bachurim.
No one is against anyone. It's
It's not
different.
against
It's
them.
not.
I'm just saying, like, they're not teaching
You-
Musar, they're not teaching Chassidut, they're not teaching.
They
just
say the
teaching Litvish.
Chilonim have got a better chance of becoming Baucher overseas because there's no political agenda overseas.
You're right. We need to. The thing. It says the Beis Hamidrash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam. So really, it would be better if everyone would get along and everyone would learn from each other. But Jewish people, 6 Jews, 10 opinions. What do they say? So everyone has a different way of looking at everything. But of course, it's that would be the best if everyone would learn from everyone else. And really, that's the way. It says machloket shel Shem Shamayim, a machloket that was for the sake of heaven. It's going to continue, because what would happen? Let's say there wouldn't be the Hasidish. There would just be the Litvisha, right? Or there would just then that would weaken. That would weaken. So the Torah learning might be stronger, but it would weaken maybe the fear of Hashem and serving Hashem. And if there would just be Hasidim, and there wouldn't be Litvisha, so then the learning Torah would be weaker. So Hashem brings this argument so that they should each complement each other. But that's not the way we're supposed to look at it. They're really supposed to complement each other. But you're right. If someone looks at it and he says bad things about the Lubavitcher Rebbe or about Litvish Tzaddik or Shach or whatever, so that's wrong. We're not allowed to so lashon hara, especially about tzaddikim, right? So if someone does that, then that's wrong. But if someone, it doesn't matter if someone learns from one Rebbe and his Rebbe only uses Musar. So okay, so he only uses Musar. As long as he serves Hashem, he dabs every day, and he learns Torah, so he doesn't know Hasidus. Okay. It's not the worst thing. Because Musar also has in it also Kabbalah, Zohar, you learn Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Mesilas Yesharim, which, like I said last time, it's
12
probably 12 steps. The most important book in Judaism is Mesilas Yesharim, because it teaches you how to go from one step to the other to get close to Hashem, right? It's a very important book. One of the Vilna Gaon said that. Even Hasidic Rebbe said that. It's very important to study Mesilas Yesharim. Why is that? Because it was the only books of Musar that actually shows you how to go from step to step, to get closer and closer to Hashem. Because if you take another Musar book like Or Tzadikim, whatever, it goes through different middos, and it doesn't give you like a specific way how to get closer and closer to Hashem, like go from one step to the other step. Okay? Anyway, so we didn't manage to study Kesuvim today, but again, if any of you want to know, I can send to you if you give me an email, I can probably send you the copy of how to finish every year Tanakh and Mishnayos. The whole Tanakh and the whole Shishter Mishnah. And I think it's very important for everybody to do that, to have a program to finish the Torah, to have a curriculum.
The Torah or the Tanakh?
Everything.
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 So every year
you should finish.
Tanakh and Torah.
Yes.
Very nice. So can I give you my email?
Yes.